As a rising star in business, one of the questions you want to ask yourself is what is the fastest way to cash flow your business or your brand? Today, I will do a high level overview, giving you a step by step approach that you can take to position your business and your brand to cash flow. But let me quickly go through a couple of things that can benefit you. When you start a business and you want to cash flow and cash flow fast, one of the things that you want to seriously consider is to become an influencer. Influencer marketing has proven to have tremendous impact on the visibility, the reach, the impact, the client conversion, and the cash flow optimization of businesses. So there's two things you're looking at here. You can position yourself to become an influencer, or you can appoint influencers to help endorse your brand, to bring the visibility, and to help you to reach your clientele base and convert into sales. So I want you to seriously consider this recommendation. The next concept that I want you to look at is having value that people value. In my very last program, I talk about value, having value that people value. So I'm not going to spend much time going into that today. I want you to look back at the previous program, and you will have a detailed outline in terms of what I would have looked at. I looked at real estate and I looked at other issues in relation to having value that people value. The third concept that I would like you to consider when you want to start a business or scale a business, you want to start a brand and you want to cash flow fast, I want you to consider also becoming value that people value. And I will explain this today so as to ensure that moving forward, you have a clear mental picture of practical steps that you can take to become value that people value. There are two other concepts that I want you to consider, and over the next 2 weeks, I will spend some time doing a deep dive into them so you understand how to navigate this ecosystem that will give you the tools, the processes, and the systems to cash flow your business and to cash flow your brand. So the next step is how do you give value that people value? And last is how do you systemize your process? So you have transparency, consistency, accountability, scalability, transferability, and so much more. These are all concepts that we will go into. So moving forward, you will understand practical steps, practical tools that you can use to position your business for success. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to say because it's very important that these thoughts be expressed. There's a couple of things that I tend to see, and what I see is that many people see with their eyesight when they should be seeing with their mindsight. You know, sometimes you see things, but you really can't explain how the process works. And that happens because you're not seeing with your mindset. You're not training the mindset to understand what you're actually seeing. The next thing that I want to say here is that many people hear the message, but still do not understand what is being said. Today, we are talking about master the fastest ways to cash flow your business and your brand. And my biggest wish is that you not only see with your eyes, but you can now see with your mindset. And that you not only hear the message, but you understand the message. So when I come back, we will do a deep dive into the whole concept that we call the fastest ways to cash flow your business and your brands.
an influencer, it gives you the edge that separates you from the competition. The GIPP initiative, the Global Influencers Partners Program, is designed to expose you to over 5 billion potential consumers across the world. When you are a rising star in business and you need visibility, reach, impact, client conversion, and cash flow optimization, positioning yourself to become a global influencer may be the ideal tool that you need in your arsenal to win in business. I encourage you to join the GIPP initiative and position your business to build confidence, trust, and credibility and cash flow optimize the fastest.
All right. The last word you hear there is cash flow optimized the fastest. So the big question I want to put to you right now, what are the fastest ways to cash flow your business and your brand? Above, I give you a list of techniques and strategies that you can deploy to position yourself to cash flow and cash flow fast. Now, in answering that question, one of the first things that I want us to look at is how to become value that people value. That's the second concept that we look at above. How to become value that people value. And one of the first things that I want you to consider here is to identify and stress test your ideal client needs. So when you want to become value that people value, the very first thing that I want you to consider here is to identify and stress test your ideal client needs. Now let's pause here a little bit and dissect this, because remember what I said earlier. Sometimes you see things, but you should be seeing with your mind sight and not your eyesight. And sometimes you hear things, but then you still do not understand the message. What do you hear from the statement I've just stated? And that statement is again, identify and stress test your ideal client needs. What exactly do you understand from that statement? Now, the average person may perhaps take away two important concepts from that statement. One, you hear identify the ideal client, and two, you hear stress test the ideal client needs. You're correct if that is your understanding. But when you are hearing with your mind sight and seeing with your mind sight, you go deeper than just those two understanding. All right. One of the first thing that you need to understand from this statement is that you need to master your MVO. Your MVO means your minimum viable offer or your most viable offer. You must have your MVO and you must master your MVO, because remember the first two. Listen to the statement very carefully. Identify and stress test your ideal client. Now, before someone consider you to be their consultant, you have to have something of value that they want. So what mindset is saying to you is that you would have assumed that position of having value that people value. For example, in this case, you could be a SCP. What is an SCP? An SCP is a sales communication professional. And a sales communication professional is relevant to the success of every business. Why? Because an expert in the field of an SCP, they understand marketing, they understand people, they understand research, all of which is necessary to help that business to cash flow and to cash flow fast. So you have to assume one of these positions that I'm going to go through now. You either have to be an SCP, a BFC, or a debt mitigation specialist, just to give three examples. All right. Now, now that we have looked at this, the second concept that you need to look at when you are on that pathway to have value that people value, you need to identify your clients. All right. And in this case, because you are in a professional platform, you are taking the time to identify your client. Now, your client could be business owners, and as you're targeting business owners, you are targeting micro, small, medium, or large scale businesses. You need to identify your ideal client. All right. I have my a colleague who is going to be joining me very shortly on stage. Clement Frank is here. Um, So you need to take that time when you want to be valued that people value to not only know your value offer, not only master your MVO, but you need to take the time to identify your ideal client. All right. The next step that I'm going to quickly go through here, you want to make it personal. If you listen to that statement that I said earlier, identify and stress test your ideal client needs. I didn't say identify and stress test Tom ideal client or Patsy and ideal clients. I say your ideal client. So what you should be understanding from this statement here also is that you want to make it personal. All right. You and making it personal means that you are passionate about getting to know your ideal client. You're passionate. All right. Your ability to deliver products and services. You're doing this with passion. You have something to live for, something to die for. What is your something to die for? So you want to have value that people value. You want to be value that people value. What is your something to die for? The last concept that you should be taking away from this is when we talk about stress tests your ideal client needs. This is like saying, make it make sense. All right? Make it make sense. You're not going to introduce a product or a service to the market unless you stress test it, unless you know that it makes sense to be doing what you want to do. And stress testing means a lot of things. I'm doing a high level overview of those concepts today. Stress testing your ideal clients means you're collecting information about your ideal clients. You're assessing information about your ideal client. You're leveraging those data to innovate products and to innovate services. You're stress testing. You're making it make sense. And then you're mitigating based on market changes that is taking place. There are many rising stars pursuing a career that was never stress tested. Can you imagine this? That you're studying to become an artist, but you never stress test the demand curve for your skill set. So at the end of the studies of your program, you recognize that there's not much job opportunities and there's not much opportunities to cash flow. And this can very well be the reality depending on where you are in the world. So when we talk about stress testing, identifying your ideal client, and stress testing, these are all things that you would need to do. And we are still on the heading, the fastest ways to cash flow your business. The first concept that I show there is become an influencer. The second is have value that people value. Look back at my previous program and you will get that. The third is become value that people value, give value that people value, and optimize, systemize your processes. All right, so I'm going to pause here for now and I'm going to introduce my team player to join the conversation. Hey, Frank, how are you?
Hey, I am fantastic. Good being here.
Awesome. Awesome. I see you guys are late, but in any case, you're here. And today, of course, we're talking about the business boot camp. We're talking about having value and that people value. I do believe it's an important topic because having value that people value means that, you know, you're not just assuming that this is the value that you have, but you are assuming that you have value that people value based on the fact that you're doing the research, you're collecting the information, and based on the market intelligence, you are building the right skill sets in alignment to people dreams and hopes and aspiration. But I would love to have your take um, from an economist standpoint, from a leader standpoint, on the importance of being valued that people value in business and life. I would love to have your take.
Thanks, Gary. Excuse me. I like the
Welcome.
topic of becoming a high net. word investor or personal value that people value. And for listeners who may be out there wondering the term net worth, what is net worth? Your net worth is what what you own minus what you owe, what you have, and what is given up. So you can calculate yours by adding up all your assets and then subtracting your liabilities. Valza recommends Empower's Net Worth Calculator, which aggregates a person's financial accounts for real-time net worth tracking. Although the concept of net worth may sound straightforward, there is often disagreement about exactly what should be included in net worth calculation. So we come to what we talk about assets and liability. Records show that only 35% of US adults that were surveyed feel a mortgage should be factored into a person's net worth, even though 59% agreed they'd include home equity. Checking and savings account, property values, financial investments, retirement funds are the only factors that majority of US adults would include in a net worth calculation. All of these are assets. What's the average net worth? Most people, 74%, believe that the average net worth of an adult is less than $100,000. And the third respondent, which is 33%, think the average net worth sits between, say, $10,000 and just under $30,000. People's net worth often varies by age. First, as they increase their income and diversify their assets, and then withdrawals from earnings in retirement. This is evident by network people who use Empower Personal Dashboard. So if the averages seem high, it's because the affluent households drive the figure up. So a person with a high net worth, we call him a high net worth individual, HNWI. The adults that were surveyed gave a wide range of response for what they considered a high net worth individual. And the median average landed at $400,000. The figure is much lower than broadly accepted definition of HNWI, someone with at least 1 million in liquid assets. Despite these discrepancies, the vast majority of adults surveyed, which is 74%, still don't think it's particularly likely that they'll become a high net worth individual. Only 3% say they are ready. If you ask them, then what makes a high net worth individual? First is frequently checking in on and tracking finances, high salary, having high earning potential from multiple sources, maintaining a diversified investment portfolio, being frugal with spending and investing in property. But interestingly, nearly 3 in 10, 29% think that getting help from family or receiving, we call it inheritance, is also important to achieve high net worth. So what is the high earning potential? When surveyed, they place a high value on earned income. In order to achieve a high net worth, respondents believe a person needs to earn $100,000 a year. And income can certainly help, but it's not everything. Making money is only a part of how a person builds wealth. It's also important to make sure your money is working as hard as you work to earn it. when we look at all those factors, Gary spoke about stress testing. And for a lot of us who don't know what stress testing is, it's basically a computer simulation technique that is used to test the resilience of institutions and investment portfolios against possible future financial situations. And such testing is customarily used by the financial industry. And this helps them to gauge what we call investment risk and adequacy of assets, and help evaluate internal processes and controls. In recent years, regulators have also required financial institutions to carry out stress tests to ensure capital holdings and other assets are adequate. We need to understand stress testing because companies that manage assets and investments commonly use stress testing to determine portfolio risk, then set in place any hedging strategies that is necessary to mitigate against possible losses. And specifically, their portfolio managers use what's it called? Internal proprietary stress testing programs. And this program allows or evaluates how well the assets that they manage might weather certain market occurrences and external events. So asset and liability matching stress tests are widely used. And they're used by companies that want to ensure that they have the proper internal controls and procedures in place. Retirement insurance portfolios are also frequently stress tested to ensure that cash flow, payout levels, and other measures are well aligned. In stress testing, there's regulations. In 2008, when they had the financial crisis, regulatory reporting for financial industry, especially the banks, it was significantly expanded. And they focus on the stress testing and capital adequacy, mainly due to the 2010 Dodd-Frank Act. There's an act that was developed by Congress in the US. And beginning in 2011, new regulations in the US required submissions of comprehensive capital analysis and review. And that's a documentation by the banking industry. These regulations, what they do is that they require banks to report on their internal procedures for managing capital and carrying out various stress test scenarios. In addition to the CCAR, which is the comprehensive capital analysis review, in addition to that reporting, all the banks in the United States deemed too big to fail by the Financial Stability Board, and typically those with more than 50 billion in assets, they have to provide stress test reporting on planning for a bankruptcy scenario. In the government's most recent reporting review of these banks in 2018, there were 22 international banks and 8 that were based in the United States were designated as too big to fail. So currently you have Basel III is also in effect for global banks. Now, let me explain what Basel III is. Basel III is, again, sounds more like an ominous title by thriller sequel than the last stage of US regulators. Implementation of reform meant to ensure the stability of the banking system. However, the banking industry has depicted the reforms which largely call for the country's largest banks to put aside more capital in reserve to weather financial storms as a threat to American economy. So in a lobbying blitz, Basel III supporters have called unprecedented. The bank lobby has amassed an army of lobbyists in Washington, D.C. and poured millions into media campaign to denounce the proposed regulations. So that's just a background to Basel III. What is important? Stress testing involves running these computer simulations to identify those hidden vulnerabilities in institutions and in investment portfolios in order to evaluate how well they might weather adverse events and market conditions. And there are various types of stress testing. Stress testing, as I said, when you look, the literature about business strategy and corporate governance, which identifies several approaches to these exercises. And among the most popular are stylized scenarios, hypotheticals, and historical scenarios. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the historical stress test, which is really short. In a historical scenario, the business or the asset class, portfolio, or individual investment is run through a simulation based on a previous crisis. For example, of historical crisis under the stock market crash of, say, October 1987. Then they had the Asian crisis of 1997. And then you have the tech bubble that burst in 1999 and 2000. That's the historical stress testing. Then there's a hypothetical stress testing. That stress test is generally more specific, and it's often focusing on how a particular company might be able to weather a particular crisis. For example, let's say a firm in California might stress test against a hypothetical earthquake, or an oil company might do so against the outbreak of war in the Middle East. So the stylized scenarios are a little more scientific in the sense that only one or a few test variables are adjusted at once. For example, the stress test might involve Dow Jones index losing 10% of its value in a week. Then there's a simulated stress testing. Now, as for the methodology for stress tests, there is Monte Carlo simulation, and later on I can get into that. It's one of the most widely known. And this type of stress testing can be used for modeling probabilities of various outcomes given specific variables. Factors considered in the Monte Carlo simulation, for example, often include various economic variabilities. And so companies can also turn to professionally managed risk management and software providers for various types of stress tests. The Moody Analytics is one example of an outsourced stress testing program that can be used to evaluate risk in asset portfolios. Are there advantages and disadvantages of stress testing? Yes, they are. Because stress tests are forward-looking analytical tools that help financial institutions and banks to better understand their financial position, their financial risks. And they help the managers of banks identify what measures to take if certain events arise and what they should do to mitigate risks. So as a result, they are better able to form action plans to thwart threats and prevent failures. For investment managers, they are better able to assess how well managed assets might perform during economic downturns. So to perform stress tests, the financial institution need to create the framework and processes for which a test can be performed. And this restructuring is complex and is often associated with costly mistakes. For example, it is possible that the test scenario does not represent the type of risks a bank may face. And this may be due to what we call insufficient data or the test designer's inability to create a relevant test. And in the end, the results of the test may lead to the creation of plans for events that are not likely to occur. And this misrepresentation can cause institutions to ignore the risks that are possible. Lastly, the banks with unfavorable results may be barred from paying dividends to their customers and shareholders, as well as may be penalized. So what are the pros? The pros for stress testing are: it helps mitigate risk. It enables better financial planning. It highlights banks or asset strengths and weaknesses. On the flip side, the cons is it may produce unfavorable consequences. It is complex and costly to administer, and it may result in inadequate planning. I'll hand you over to Gary now, and when it's my time again, I'll give you some examples of stress testing. Thank you, Gary.
All right. I like the high level overview. And of course, I love that you take it from both corporate and perhaps an economic standpoint in terms of stress testing. It goes to show the importance of stress testing. I just want to add a few more things to what you would have said. To do a proper stress test has tremendous advantage. Yes, it may be capital intensive because it entails market research. But one of the things that I would always say is that the cost for intelligence often justify the end results that you're looking for. Because absent from doing that stress test is like if you're doing business with a blindfold over your eyes. And that's not the way to do business. And it is by doing business in this way is the reason why we have so many rising stars in business that start and fail in very short period of time. What the statistics are showing is that 28.9% of business startup fail in the first year. If you look back at 2001, you would see that that is the statistics. In 2022, 2022, what happens there? We had 40% of business startup that failed. And in 2023, we had 49.9% of business startup that failed. And why do you think that those businesses are failing? Now, rising to the occasion to be able to do the stress test, it will allow you to clearly identify the best way to develop your value offer. And what I want to do now is to go again and do a little deep dive by giving you a step-by-step approach as to how this can work. So one of the things that you're doing when you're stress testing, you're researching the ideal client. It's important. Why? Because we see many rising stars who get into business, and one, you have an assumption that everyone is your consumers. And that's a falsified notion. It's practically impossible. At the right time and under the right circumstances, I will go into the analysis to really help you to understand that everyone is not your ideal client. But if you're not, first of all, identifying your ideal client, if you're not stress testing the ideal client, you're setting yourself up for failure. Now, let me just examine what identifying your ideal client looks like. In this particular case, what it means that you're taking the time to identify the needs of a particular segment of the market. For example, you might be targeting businesses. And what would you say are some of the specific needs of the market? Business need access to market. So perhaps you might have the skill sets to research geographies and identify markets that are specific to the client that you're representing. That in of itself position you as an individual who have become a value that people value because you understand a specific need of the market and you have innovated a specific skill set or masters a specific skill set that is now valuable to businesses. What are some of the other challenges that businesses would need? Are you stress testing all of this before you start that business process? If you want to cash flow and cash flow fast, you need to put yourself in that position of strength where you have this body of knowledge and you can leverage this body of knowledge to your advantage. What are some of the other needs that businesses may have? Business need access to capital. The research is showing that you talk with micro, small, medium businesses, sometimes even large scale businesses. They want to grow further, they want to expand. And sometimes, depending on where they are in the world, they don't have access to capital. I could recall a few years ago, I was talking to a well established architect, and what he specializes in is doing building plan drawing. He has done this for thousands of persons over the history of doing this. He has built hundreds of properties. Now that he has built up a rapid war of experience, he now wanted to do a gated community. But guess what? Even the bank, with the credibility that he had, he didn't reach all of the pre-qualification criteria to get funding from the bank. What I want to say, you're going to have this individual, but you're going to have so many other individuals just like this individual that need access to capital. Are you stress testing this? Are you researching this? So when you start a particular business, you know that these are the ideal client, these are their specific needs, and your MVO, minimum and most viable offer, is relevant to their needs and their wants and their expectations. So when we talk about stress testing, it means that you have a clear mental picture of who is the market, what is the market need, and how you can satisfy those needs. Now, in the financial world, you have a plethora of financial instruments. You have debt instruments, you have equity instruments, you have credit instruments, you have hard money lending instruments, you have business financing instruments. Perhaps as you research the need of the market, you are now innovating your MVO, minimum and most viable offer, in alignment with what the market needs. But of course, if you're not doing any type of research, again, this is a recipe for disaster. You're likely to struggle in business. You're likely to fail in business. When you can just pause a little bit, do that research, and because you have the intelligence, you now have become value that people value. There's a couple of things that I want to say here. There are a number of research methods that you can deploy to your advantage. One of the methods that I see is very commonly used, and I want to encourage you to desist doing this, is to use speculative data as a means of data analytics. And what is speculative data? It means that you sit and you make a decision, which is an ill-informed decision, that this is the business model that you should start. And you make this decision because you have an assumption that there's heavy demand for a particular product, but you're using speculative data. Speculation can be the pin that breaks the camel back, break your dream, because speculative data is not information that you want to be using to make an informed and educated decision. Speculative data is not the data that you want to use when you want to become value that people value. However, the alternative that you can use is what we call secondary data. Now, secondary data stands on two different spectrums. Because secondary data, although they're going to come from many different sources, secondary data could be updated, meaning that it has been recently done and it is reliable, or secondary data could be outdated. And outdated secondary data is as bad as if you're using speculative data, because secondary data will help you to understand who's the ideal client. Secondary data will help you to understand the needs of the ideal client. Secondary data will help you to understand where to find the ideal client. Secondary data will help you to understand if the ideal client have the demographic biodata traits that you need to understand before you innovate products and services for the ideal client. And when secondary data is outdated and you're using the database to make informed and educated business decisions, you're shooting yourself 10 times in the legs. You go one step further, and it's what we were talking about earlier on, primary data analytics. Now, primary data analytics, it means that you are getting the boots on your feet. You're going to the ground. You're rubbing shoulder with the ideal client. You're building out relationship. You have a team that is on the ground, and they're working with you to collect sensitive information, analyzing sensitive information to enable you to leverage sensitive information to make impact with the ideal client. Now, this may be capital intensive, all right? And because it is capital intensive, we see that a lot of rising star in business, you run away from this, all right? You run away from this, and then you lean right back on speculative data analysis. You lean right back on secondary data that might be outdated. The beauty about primary data analytics is that it is current, all right? And when you understand how to deploy primary market research, it puts you at a major disadvantage, because when you understand how to do it and to do it right, guess what is happening here? It gives you an opportunity to interface with the ideal client. And when you're skilled, you're helping to bring down the barriers of the know, like, and trust. You do an excellent job at this. You're even able to raise capital during this process. And let me give a practical example. In the American market today, the demand for houses is 4 million below the supply curve. So guess what happens here? You don't notice unless you do the research. So you've done the research and you recognize that there's a tremendous demand for housing. But then you go a step further into your research, and what you do, you identify who are your potential clients. And because you have a database with the potential clients, people who are looking for housing, guess what you do? You reach out to them. And because you're now able to reach out to them and to build a relationship with them, primary market research, guess what? You present to them your floor plan. And because you understand what you're doing, you get 10 clients to buy in. You get 20 future tenants to buy in. You get 50 future tenants to buy in. You get 100 future tenants to buy in. And guess what? They're paying you monies up front. Guess what? You're cash flowing the business before the business even gets started, because of market research. And of course, all the other factors that comes along with doing market research. As I'm saying, there's a right and wrong in how you go about doing these things. But the point that I want to hit home is that you need to stress test all of these things and put yourself in the know. The reason we're going to be using the term stress test is because you want to ensure that you have all of the information that's going to help you to make the best and smartest decision in terms of doing business. All right. Business could be challenging when you don't have the right information. Business can also be a challenge, even when you have the right information. But the beauty about doing business with the right information, you already know what are what is possible and what is not possible. And you always want to put yourself in this position of strength to ensure that you have the information. And the only way to have it, to truly know if you have value that people value, or if you are a value that people value, is by stress testing. It doesn't make sense to spend 4 or 5 years to get a master's degree. And then at the end of that program, you recognize that the demand for your skill set is depreciated, or the market realities are changing and you didn't mitigate your studies in alignment with the changes that are taking place in the market. Stress test says that you're not only current, but you're futuristic, and you're able to apply essential leadership, management, marketing techniques in alignment with changes that are taking place. So I'm going to pause here for now, and I'm going to reach out back to my colleague to continue to develop on the points that he has made. Frank, all to you.
Yeah, thanks. Now, there are some examples that I can share with you of stress tests. The banks and financial institutions often use the Federal Reserve's Dodd-Franklin Act stress tests, or shortly put this, DFAST. And they also use a comprehensive capital analysis and review, which is CCAR, for the stress test. The Federal Reserve administers the CCAR stress test annually for banks with at least 100 billion in assets. This test identifies whether banks have sufficient capital to operate during an economic downturn, and if there are plans in place to address such events and other associated risks. Specifically, the Federal Reserve looks at the bank's capital, its plans for its capital, example, the dividends, and how it assesses capital needs. The FAST, Dodd-Franklin Act stress test, required for banks with at least 250 billion in assets, and is often used in conjunction with the CCAR. This test can be conducted directly by the Federal Reserve or by financial institutions under the direction of the Fed. And this is like the CCAR reviews whether a bank or financial institution has enough capital to account for losses and continue operations in the event of an economic turmoil. Now, although both tests have similar goals, they are administered differently to address as many possible events and risks. So, some facts about stress testing. It's an analytical technique to show how a financial service company or bank will be affected by certain financial events or situations. In other words, it shows what can happen and how well prepared institutions are when certain stresses are introduced. The example for stress testing, the Federal Reserve requires banks of a certain size to perform stress tests, and such as the DFAST and the CCAR. And these tests review the bank's capital and how well it can meet obligations and operate during trying economic times. It's often performed by the use of computer simulations, which run different scenarios. Company might use historical events, hypothetical situations, or simulation to test how well a company would operate under the specific conditions. If there's a failed stress test, then it may be required that institution, the bank, whichever company, may be required to increase the capital reserves, or they will have to form a contingency plan to address the threats. In the banking financial service industry, some failure result in fines or the prohibition of certain activity, such as paying dividends. The bottom line is that stress tests can be effective analytical tools in identifying whether a company has sufficient capital, if their assets are strong, and effective plans to weather an economic storm, a downturn, or a crisis. And of course, they can use the historical, hypothetical, or simulated events to create test scenarios, or they may be required by a regulatory body to perform certain tests. Whatever the results, it can help the institution to better understand their strengths, their weaknesses, and areas of opportunities. So what you need to do is put whatever skills and training to the test. That's what we're here. We're here to help you to understand the importance of stress testing, the importance that you make sure that your future is planned, even if there's an economic downturn. And these are some of the tests that has to be administered for you to have a positive scenario or a positive effect. Thank you, Gary.
All right, great share, Frank. Now, I just want to re-emphasize this. In the world of business, in the world of economics, if you are not running your tests, all right, there's what you call a gamble and testing. And when it comes to financial investment, you could either be gambling or you could be testing the market. When it comes to managing a business, you could be gambling with the business idea, or you could be building a business based on market testing. So the concepts that you would have gone into, Frank, is very useful. I don't want to go into the intellect. For me, I don't want to get into the intellectual side today, but I'm just going to go there briefly by saying that there's a concept that we talk about a lot in the capital investment. You find that the average person making a decision to invest, they are making what we call the front end analytics. And the front end analytics is driven by a lot of hype in the media, a lot of emotion. And you find that that is risky. You cannot be making solid investment decision based on hype and emotional decision. There's what we call the back end analytics. And the back end analytics is where you are pulling historical data, where you are doing the analytics that is going to be helping you to make informed and educated investment decision. So I just want to add that a little bit just to re-emphasize the importance of data, all right, and stress testing and the analytics. Now, what I want to do, I want to give a more graphical picture of stress testing. When I started this program today, I looked at the issue of the fastest way to cash flow your business. And one of the things that I established is that there are a number of steps that you can do to cash flow fast. You can become an influencer. You can have value that people value. My program last week, I talked about that. We look a lot of real estate. I also said you can become value that people value. And one of the issues that was stable in becoming value that people value, I said that you can become an SCP. And what is an SCP? It means you're a sales communication professional. But how do you know that you're value that people value as a sales communication professional? And that's a very unique program that we have designed. And we have written also multiple books that will help you to understand that. But let me go into this stress test. From the research that we are seeing is that the success of every business depends on the SCP, the sales communication professional. And that should be a strong enough statement that tells you that when you become an expert as an SCP, businesses will have demand for you. Why? Because businesses that want to do business the right way, they know that you understand market research. Businesses that want to do business the right way, they know that you understand how to leverage the influencer model. Businesses that want to do business the right way, they know that you understand the process of commanding attention, piquing interest, arousing desire, moving the client into action, making impact. They know that you understand all of this because of the fact that you are an established SCP. So, because of the fact that they know that you can help them through this growth curve, who they're going to come to when they need the expertise to help that business to build their corporate brand, to build their personal brand, they're going to come to an expert. And a sales communication professional is not a salesperson. They understand the business ecosystem and they're able to help businesses to optimize their growth. Let us look at another benefits of being an SCP. SCPs position businesses to build client relations and break through the know, like, and trust. Now, the realities of starting a business, it may be a good business, you may have a good brand, but guess what? If enough people don't know about you, they don't have enough reason to want to trust you and like you and invest in you. Perhaps your SCP might be an influencer, or if they're not the influencer, they may have relationship with influencers, and they're able to bring those talent on your side to help you to break through the barriers of know, like, and trust, which is going to bring you to a point that you would allow you to cash flow much faster. All right. So this again sets you up to have value that people value. And because you are value that people value, it's going to set the stage for you to maximize your chance of earning. Because businesses know your skill sets, they're going to come to you. Let me go a step further. SCPs position businesses to get local, national, regional, and international visibility, reach, impact, client conversion. In other words, the SCP is not the kind of leader that's going to tell you to stay local. The SCP, the sales communication professional, because they understand their craft, they're going to say, hey, you're local today, but what my market intelligence is telling me is that you have a regional market and you have an international market, and I know just how to get you there. I know how to get you visibility in the international market. I know how to ensure that you're reaching the ideal client. I know how to help you to make impact because I know your brand. I understand the client in that market. I know how to create the alignment. I know how to position your brand to cash flow optimize. I know how to help you to build impact and confidence and trust and credibility. The sales communication professional, based on everything that I'm saying, is like music to the ear of a rising star in business or anyone in business because they have value. They are value that businesses value. All right. Let me go one step further. SCP position businesses to cash flow fast and achieve and exceed the business financial target. The right sales communication professional on your side, they're not just going to get you to cash flow over a long period of time. They're going to have short-term plans of cash flow, medium and long-term plans to cash flow. And they're going to show you new, innovative, creative ways in which you can cash flow your operation. Again, this should be music to every rising star in business ears because you get into business. Why? Because you want a cash flow. And if there are market intelligence, if there are tools available to help the business to cash flow faster, why are you not using it? The SCP can, the sales communication professional, can put you in that position of strength to achieve all of this. Let me go one more step further. The SCP position businesses to leverage communication, leadership, and management skills, all of which are essential to businesses that wants to be successful. All right. So I've basically documented some of the significant roles that SCP plays in the life of business. So you now can make an educated decision as a rising star in business whether or not you should be developing a relationship with SCPs, sales communication professionals. And this is how you're able to achieve what we call becoming value that people value, because you have stress test. You research the market, you are certain that the market, in this case, businesses, they have specific needs, and you have now innovate a product or a service that aligns to the market need, stress testing. So you build your MVO, you master your MVO. In this case, you're a sales communication professional, but then you align your MVO to the MVTM. The MVTM meaning your minimum viable target market or your most viable target market. You create this alignment. And this alignment will not take place unless you're doing the research, unless you're doing that stress test. When you want to be successful in what you're doing, it is absolutely necessary to take the time and pause and say, how can I do it the right way? You know, sometimes it's not just being the first to start. It makes more sense to start the process of doing business in the right way. And having the market intelligence is what's going to set you up for success. It's what's going to position you to become value that people value. So when you invest in mastering the art of an SCP, the sales communication professional, and you publicize your ability to help businesses to achieve visibility, reach, impact, client conversion, cash flow optimization, build confidence, trust, and credibility across the business ecosystem, you set yourself up to be more successful. So I trust that you had enough nuggets today. Call me and Frank. We just did a high level overview. The content is not exhaust, but the aim is to ensure that we're giving you enough information so you can start to think of what it takes to be successful. I know a number of persons might be saying, what you guys are saying sound complex, it sounds hard. But what I want to say to you, with the right mentor, with the right coach, with the right sponsors, with the right support on your side, we can take away the blunt of what is sounding complicated, and we can be the persons helping you to move those systems forward, because we are doing this with multiple clients across the world, and we can do it for you. Frank, over to you, my friend, your thoughts and then your closing remarks. Time flies so fast when you're having fun. If you're at the hour already, Frank.
So, um, how does the stress testing work? It often follows a defined process. And they have basically four main steps. The first one is profiling. And the profiling is where the process starts with discovery. What are your specific goals? What are your specific concerns? What problems do you want to solve? What opportunities are you seeking to benefit from? So these are what questions you ask when you're doing the profiling. Then you look at the solution evaluation. Now, when there's a clarity about your goals, your objectives, your concerns and limitations, the various strategies or products, then can be assessed. And there are numerous ways to dissect and evaluate solutions, including working the assumptions. The assumptions underlying the strategies or product are systematically modified in order to determine how they are likely to work when the what ifs or of the scenario change. Then the evaluating alignment with goals and objectives. It's essential to determine whether the strategies and products likely will accomplish your goals and objectives. A solution might be high quality, but still not deliver the specific results you want or need. Then the third process is analytic comparisons. So based on the evaluation, alternative solutions might be considered. And it can be very useful to conduct analytic side-by-side comparisons of solution. And then finally, you have your recommendation. At the conclusion of the stress testing, you present your recommendations for consideration, and the next course of action is then decided. Because the power of stress testing, leading professionals are increasingly making it a cornerstone or a priority of the way they work with individuals and families. Consider that a sizable majority, let me say 78 point or 77% of 181 senior executives at multifamily offices, which are organizations that serve wealthy families, call stress tests an important deliverable for their clients. By and large, we see those stress tests being focused primarily on investment management solutions, with other areas like life insurance and wealth planning, they're getting attention to varying degrees. This intensive focus on investment management may be too limiting. For example, while just around 40% of the executives have stress-tested clients, life insurance, a full 64.4% of those execs uncover problems that require corrective actions. But this isn't surprising. Many affluent families purchase life insurance to address estate tax concerns. Sometimes life insurance is obtained to create a larger estate or to make a charitable gift at death. And other times, the intent is to benefit from the tax-free internal build-up. But it's common that some of these affluent families end up with amounts of life insurance that exceed their wants and needs. Additionally, their life insurance may be poorly structured. And when life insurance portfolios are not in sync with wealth planning strategies, then you can have trouble occurring down the road. And this suggests that stress test should be widely applied to other areas of the client's financial lives. Stress testing is growing in importance. It's reasonable to expect stress testing to garner more interest and attention among clients and their advisors. And as evidenced by the fact that more than 80% of the executives saying that these tests will become more important going forward. Consider one way that stress testing can add value. Evaluating tax mitigation strategies. Today, there are a number of ways to lower corporate and personal income and thereby paying less taxes. The wealthy may look to stress test 3 strategies in order to ensure they're not running afoul of revenue services anyway with their approaches. Next thing is more access. Stress testing Once a feature available mainly to the wealthiest among citizens in the US is now increasingly being offered to a broader range of individuals and families. And so as a result, you may have an opportunity to put your financial and legal strategies and your plans through their paces and determine if they're set up to deliver the results that you want. So, stress test. We're here to help you in stress test and how to perform your stress test, how to operationalize your stress test. And it's going to be very important, not only in the US, but across the world. Back to you.
Great share, Frank. I want to say this. Frank has given a number of high-level overview of economic and corporate systems. Frank is about to complete and release his new book that will help you to better unlock some of the realities of economics, business, and leadership. So I want to encourage you to stay tuned for that. And when that book comes out, you need to get multiple copies of that book for your community. Having said that, the issues that we are discussing today, these issues are all focused on helping businesses to make better, smarter business decisions. It's really putting you in a position, designed to put you in a position of strength to be more successful. Now, there's only so much that we can say in a short period of time. But in an effort to help you to get these information in a way that you can truly digest it, and as you digest it, when you need the support to apply those concepts, we are here to give you that support. I want to point you to where you can get our books. There is a link that I'm going to put on screen now, and you can go to this link, and then you can find these books. When you click on that link, you can go to books, and you will see that we have not just one book. We have 11 books available right now, 11 volume of the book, Master the Sales Communication Process. Now they're audiobooks. That means you can download, you can listen, and you can internalize that information. You can come right back to us, and we can help you to build a system so you can also apply that information. I also want to point you to another important bit of information. We have started the GIPP initiative. And what the GIPP initiative means, it means the Global Influencers Partners Program. And if you can recall at the beginning of this program, when I asked the question, what is the fastest way to cash flow? The very first thing that I said, you can become an influencer. An influencer is known, they're liked, and they're trusted. And because of this, they're able to leverage this to their advantage. Now, think about this. What if you are that influencer who is starting a business, who is scaling a business, and because of the fact that you have established confidence, trust, and credibility in the eyes of the public, people want to be with you? Well, this program, the GIPP initiative, is going to set you up to achieve that, and to achieve it very fast. Because when you become part of our community and we start to train you, we start to help you to build your systems up, guess what follows that? We're going to build you up, then we're going to put you on platform where you're going to be interfacing with over 2 billion potential consumers. We are partnering with YouTube, a very unique platform. They have over 2 billion persons who are trafficking this platform on a monthly basis, and we can get you onto that platform. And there's so much more. Talking about the fastest way to cash flow, we will also help you to build systems that within 2 months of starting, we can set up your operation to have not just a single source of income, but you ought to also have multiple streams of income to help that business to catapult upwards. So I trust that you would have enjoyed today's program. I want to say to you that if you find today's content interesting, the information that Frank and myself would share with you, I want to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share. So you will be the first to get these content that we're going to be bringing to you on a regular basis. All right. So with that being said, I want to say to you, do have a great rest of the weekend. And we will be here again on Monday at 7 a.m. EST with another broadcast of the Business Boot Camp. So with that being said, do enjoy the rest of the weekend and see you guys on Monday. Frank, I want to thank you for taking the time to come and be with us today to give information to the public. And again, we can't wait to get your book.
Thank you, Gary.